Good morning, everyone. This is Les Smith. I am with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this next session dealing with reviving the land, reimaging, reimagining brownfields and the EJ communities. Those of you who have been with us most of the week, you know the drill for the housekeeping, but there may be a few on today that have not. So just a quick reminder on housekeeping that all of your lines are muted, and we are recording the webinar for later viewing. And we will be sharing the webinar recordings later today or tomorrow morning. If you have questions for our panel today, you can type your questions in the Q&A box located in the bottom of your screen in the Zoom control panel, or you may type your question in the Whova app under questions. And with that, I will turn the microphone over to Katie Cruz.
Thank you, Les, and hello again, everybody. For those that may be new joining us, I'm Katie Cruz. I'm the Environmental Justice and Tribal Liaison at Michigan's Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And I'm really excited about today's sessions that are really focused on how we make impact at the community level. So we started this morning talking about what local governments are doing. We just wrapped up a session on supplemental environmental projects, which can be used to ensure that when environmental violations happen, that communities benefit from the penalties associated with the violation. And this session is focused on cleanup and redevelopment of contaminated properties. I just want to mention later today, we're also going to be talking about transition in EJ communities, as well as a session on future of infrastructure. So with that, I want to introduce our speakers. So if you can all turn your cameras on. We have Michelle Backham from Brownfield, who is the Brownfields Redevelopment Coordinator for Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. John Grossens with US EPA Region 5, and Dana Callaware who is a Community Assistance Team Specialist in Kent, Muskegon, and Ottawa counties with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. So thank you all for being here, and I will turn things over to Michelle to get us started.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Bacon with Eagle's Brownfield Redevelopment section of the Remediation and Redevelopment Division. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. We're excited to go over our program and share the different opportunities that Eagle and the EPA and the MEDC have to help us communities and assist them with funding some of their projects in their areas. Here's my contact information, and these slides will be available after as well. So if you have any questions or want to contact us directly, Michelle, you can go that way. Yes.
Hey, Michelle, we're not seeing your slides yet.
Okay. All right. Why is it not going on? Hold on. It was shared. Let's see what's happening. I'll go back. Give me 1 second here.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
My Zoom does not want to pop back up. Let's see. Here we go. Share screen. Let's try this one more time. How about now? Can you see them now?
Yes, this needs a slideshow.
All right, I'm going to get to the slideshow. There we go. All right,
there you go.
All right, let's get back to this. Now I'm losing my time here. All right, so here's my contact information, and these slides will be available after as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about what can we do to revive the land? How can we put these brownfield properties back into use? We'll talk about what a brownfield is, how can we help, and what role does the community have in this whole process with obtaining some of these financial assistance mechanisms. So first of all, you heard the term brownfield quite a bit. It's used in different ways, but here at Eagle, for us, a brownfield is a piece of property that's known to be contaminated or suspected to be contaminated based on the prior use. You may see an old gas station, typically that would be a brownfield, somewhere where there are drums, maybe an old landfill. So there's lots of different scenarios on what meets the definition of a brownfield. And I know, and Dana may talk to this, under the MEDC, they have different definitions of what a brownfield is in addition to Eagles. So how can we help? What can Eagle do to help assist communities in redeveloping some of these properties that have been long out of use or eyesores or contaminated? We have multiple programs that we can use to help. Our funding, our brownfield funding, we have fundings and incentives to use. These can be used throughout the state. The first thing we have to offer is grants, right? Everybody likes free money. So this is a really popular tool that we use to assist communities and developers with some of their cleanup activities. We also have loans, and we have tax increment financing, which I'll touch on a little bit more. And Dana may touch on this too. I'm not sure, I didn't get to talk to her about it before. And then we also have site assessments, which is something that we can provide for local units of government and some others. So to start off with, our Brownfield grants and loans, this is a super popular program that we have. Our programs our funding is always awarded to the local units of government. So local units of government can apply for up to one grant per year of up to $1 million for brownfield redevelopment sites on sites that are contaminated with refined petroleum, sites like former gas stations, things like that. We also have grants, the same stipulations, one grant of up to $1 million per year for brownfield redevelopments on contaminated properties. And this would be properties that are contaminated with other hazardous substances other than petroleum. We also have loans of up to $1 million per year. Our loan programs are fantastic. It's 1.5% interest, 5 years, no payments, no interest, and it's a 15-year term. So just a quick note, this picture on the right is going to be one of our newest projects. And this project is going to be awarded a $1 million grant for the cleanup of this property and redevelopment on the east side of Detroit. And they will also be utilizing tax increment financing as well. Tax increment financing is probably one of our most used tools, but it is probably our most complicated. What exactly is the tax increment financing, or what we like to call TIF? And basically, it's a financing tool. It's used by local units of government, and it will help repay developers for eligible activities on their redevelopment. And the money is funded up front by the developer, so it comes out of their pockets first, and then they are repaid through the incremental increase in taxes. So just real quick, you can see here in this graph, the developer is going to fund, right, all of the costs up front. And the difference in tax is going to be right here. So if you have the base tax across, and I don't know if you guys can see my screen or my arrow, you probably can't. And this yellow area is the increment. So this is what they would be paid back once they have recovered their costs. Then the local units of government are going to see this extra green on the back end. So in the end, the local units of government are going to be gaining some good tax revenue on those projects. We also do site assessments, and this is a tool that we use that we actually administer and have the work done. So who can be, or who is eligible for a brownfield site assessment? It could be municipal governments, brownfield redevelopment authorities, land banks, and some limited nonprofit organizations. And what this can provide, which is a great tool, we actually have staff and contractors who go out and actually do the phase 1 environmental assessments. We can provide phase 2s. We can do in the state of Michigan the baseline environmental assessments that are required to protect the property purchaser from liability. And we can also provide plans to comply with due care obligations under Michigan state statute. So what is the community's role in all of these funding sources? One of the things is the most important to us is the communities and local units of governments can decide what projects are priorities in their areas. So when we have a project that's brought into to us, we are always working hand in hand with the local communities of government. They sponsor these projects. They decide which projects fit in their communities. Then the communities would be the ones that would apply for and actually administer our Brownfield grants and loans. And they're our partners, right? We work hand in hand throughout the project, the process, everything with them and the other stakeholders, the developers, to make sure that the community needs with this redevelopment or whichever redevelopment you have are met. And here, this is one that we did up north. This is the Brownfield Dollar General, which Dollar General doesn't seem like much, but in this community, they really needed a grocery store, they needed some jobs, and this really went a long way for this project. And they've received a grant on this project as well. So that's my, quick and dirty on our program. You can see here we have quite a big staff now. We have people in every region. This map is available with all of our contacts on the Eagle Brownfield site, or if you want to send me a message in the Whova app, I can also send it to you and get you in contact. Any questions you have, I can put you in contact with the right Brownfield coordinator or Brownfield site assessment staff for that as well. So I know it's quick, but any questions, feel free to reach out. We're happy to help. That's what we're here for. And hopefully we can help your communities throughout the state. We love doing it. It's what we really thrive on. So thanks, everyone.
And Michelle, I can start sharing my slides if you're done. Oh. Hello, everyone. This is John Grosshans with U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I'll make these slides a little bit bigger so we can see them. Great. So thank you, Michelle, for kicking that off. It's always wonderful to hear the latest from Eagle. And I will say that the last slide that Michelle showed everyone with the map, with the faces, that is possibly the best slide because that's the one that's your front door. That's how you find the resources Michelle spoke about. Each of those individuals covers a certain geography, and that's available on the website. Contact information is there. And so when questions come up, that's really a first line of getting questions answered, like Michelle said. She was not overselling that at all. That's an incredible resource. I'm going to talk about some other resources from US EPA. I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. I put a couple of these things into the chat function as well. So you've got them during the presentation and afterwards. And I'll simply say that for brownfields, echoing a lot of what Michelle has already said, we're out there to clean up the environment. We're also out there to make sure that it results in community revitalization at the end of the day. We don't want to just necessarily clean up and leave a property or a site in the same condition as it was if we can do something that would be beneficial to the community at the same time. We know a lot of cleanup is associated with redevelopment. We try to make that part of the process, part of the engagement that happens through a grant, through technical assistance that EPA does. So Michelle already showed a couple of great examples of, I love the grocery store, the Dollar General example. Grocery stores are always big. Health clinics are always really important. If you can turn a blighted building into a value add health clinic or other food source for the community, that's wonderful. That's a tremendous outcome at the same time as cleaning up the money or cleaning up the environment. But we know that's not easily done. And so I want to talk about the gap really quickly. And so you got these ideas as a community or as a site owner or as simply one who's working on a project. And the challenge is often twofold. It's uncertainty with what's underground or what's on the site, and then it's money to figure it out. And those two issues stop a lot of projects. And so that's where the Brownfields program can be helpful because it's knowledge about what's on that site, doing that investigation, finding out the historical record or doing digging to find out what's underground, and the money to actually get that completed. And that's the key to get into successful projects. And there's a couple of different things that Brownfields programs can bring to the table, whether it's the state or whether it's federal EPA bringing that brownfield assistance. And that can be just the environmental due diligence, the paperwork, the investigation that's needed for the transaction, or for that initial development planning work. It could be the actual site cleanup that takes place by actually digging into the ground, extracting the existing land, water, contamination that might exist on site, or it can be part of the planning. What happens after that's done? How do we figure out what this site might look like as a redevelopment source? This is the missing middle of a lot of projects, and that's why these resources are really helpful, because it's easy to come up with the idea and to get excited about a project, but it just takes a couple of, I would call them nickels and dimes, to get them started, get through that initial phase of investigation, and then it can lead you to larger money in the form of actual building construction to get to that grocery store, health clinic, etc. That's where we want to get to, but oftentimes these are the challenges we have to work through initially to make sure we can get there. So I'm going to talk about EPA's resources. We are but one of many stops, like I said. Certainly there are many at the state level, at the local level, and oftentimes projects need to tap into all of these to be successful. So for EPA Brownfields grants, we have a series of different types of grants that are available to do different types of projects. And I like to think that because there's a full suite of services, hopefully it can meet communities where they are. If you're a small rural community working on one project, it might be the only project you work on. We've got a project or a program that might be able to tap into that type of connection. If you're a larger city and you've got a lot of projects, we have grants, we have larger pots of money that might be more suited to your needs. A lot of folks come in through our Brownfield Assessment Grant Program is kind of the main doorway. And that's one way to get funding from EPA to do a variety of project tasks associated with brownfield redevelopment. A community might use this for compiling an inventory of where the brownfield projects are in a neighborhood, in a target district, or in the entire community. Might also be useful for looking at specific sites. What are the past uses? Where might existing contamination be located? Or potentially, what are the planning and redevelopment options associated with that site? These projects or these grants also are helpful for community engagement, making certain that there is maybe a council or a stakeholder group tracking these projects, able to host meetings to talk about what the community would like to see from a particular project redevelopment, as well as alerting them to potential environmental risks associated with the property. And then we also have assessment grants that can do a variety of these tasks, which we call our multi-purpose grants. So let's talk examples. So it's not just having a fund available from EPA for a local community. It's also how do you deploy that money? And a lot of times sites just need a little bit of help. They need that first investigation, whether it's something that is a phase 1, which is a smaller investigation, or a phase 2 investigation, which is a more intensive investigation with sampling to look at actual contamination on site, or like the planning and redevelopment that I mentioned earlier. Here's an example from River Rouge, Michigan. This is a very typical gas station scenario. And I like this one because when you look at the picture on the left, it looks like a little bit of a hot mess. You've got a site that isn't necessarily selling the community or investors or anyone really on its future, but it's at a great location. It's something that is in the community that's very visible and has a high potential and meaning to the community to get it changed. And so part of what the EPA assistance was in this project was to do a lot of redevelopment planning and visioning. What could this site become? How do you work with some of the contamination issues on that site? So it could become one of many options. And in today's economy, it's not bad to be thinking, what are the multiple outcomes? Is it going to be a health clinic, a restaurant, small commercial retail? Different investors might have different interests. The community might have different interests. And certainly the economy is saying, hey, as a market, we want to see X type of outcome at the moment. So it's always nice to have more options to look at what these sites can become. And this is one of the things that EPA resources can be useful for. One of the next steps, and really one of the larger obstacles to getting projects completed, is cleanup. So when you do that initial investigation, you do that initial envisioning, and you find out there is a lot of work to be done, there is cleanup that could be needed. We have cleanup grants that are useful for that purpose explicitly, We also have revolving loan funds. That might be the bigger pot of money that I referred to. This might be something that a larger community would have as a pot or a resource bank that can fund individual smaller projects, larger cleanup projects, and is something that is versatile for its use. I will say that a lot of times people think, oh, I have to go and get a grant for the first time. Not necessarily. A lot of this money is already on the street in Michigan. And so it is helpful to know who already has these pots of money. And if so, it makes it a little bit easier because instead of going to apply from the federal government for funding, you can go to your local government or a local entity that has an existing pot of money, talk with them about how they plan to use that money, and if you have a match with your project. That's going to save time, expense, schedule, all sorts of things can be positive outcomes from that discussion. So some examples from Michigan that involve cleanup and revolving loan fund work. Really, there's quite a few examples. So here's an example of a housing project from Ecourse, Michigan. This was done by the Downriver Community Conference. Downriver was the umbrella organization that had the revolving loan fund pot of money. In this case, they worked with the Ecourse Housing Authority, and they looked at a former housing site that was a little bit functionally obsolete, and they were looking at how do they basically build back these homes in a way that is going to be more not only environmentally sound, but also probably more responsive to the housing needs in the community of Ecourse. And so you can see here on the left, you've got a picture before of the housing, you've got a picture of construction and a picture afterwards. This is a project that was over $1 million that was put into the project from that revolving loan fund that Downriver manages for Ecourse Housing Authority to work on as part of this project. As a result, the contamination on that site was cleaned up, the housing project could move forward. One other option besides housing, of course, is traditional commercial development, industrial development. No shortage of examples of that in Michigan. Here's an example from Detroit. This is from the New Center neighborhood in Detroit. And this is a project that was a Cardinal Health warehouse. And it was formerly, essentially, again, another bit of a hot mess where you've got buildings that are in various states of deterioration. You've got piles of unknown origin on this particular property. You've got to collect a lot of properties together that have been used industrially for a number of years, some residential, but you're combining them all into a big project that's going to create jobs and create new development. This was another revolving loan fund project. And this time it came from the Port Authority. And this is money that was given to this particular project to do the picture on the right, which is the warehouse. This is a very typical type of project that EPA does. But like I said, there's no shortage of examples in Michigan. There could be examples from Grand Rapids, examples about commercial developments in the downtown. There could be examples, if we're in Lansing and we're at the conference center, we could look across the street and see the former power station, now an insurance headquarters building. There's lots of examples of where EPA money has gone into projects to close the gap and clean up the environments and deliver ultimately the redevelopment outcomes we're seeing here. Other types of grants that we have are job training grants. These are grants that help deploy training funds into communities. A little bit different than a project-oriented grant. It's really focused on workers and training associated with brownfield jobs, as well as environmental education generally. We also have just general knowledge grants about how do you write proposals? How do you get involved in brownfields? This is one thing that might be helpful to a community that's looking to learn a little bit more. How do I figure out if this is even right for me as a potential grantee? We do events, we do roundtables. This is another type of technical assistance, not necessarily digging holes, but more about holding information sessions and providing that first level of interaction with EPA on brownfield projects. And it's national, so there's a lot of different contacts. In Michigan, Kansas State University is our technical assistance provider on a lot of these projects. So if you see that name, that's the connection. They cover the entire Midwest with a lot of their services. And then finally, there's a lot of toolkits that are out there. If you have questions on a particular redevelopment topic, urban agriculture, it could be green infrastructure, it could be a power station redevelopment. These are resources we have available online. And hopefully we can see you at our upcoming conference in Oklahoma City at the end of this year to learn more about brownfields. With that, I'll flip it to Dana.
All right, thank you. Just give me a second here while I switch over my screen. Let's see here. Okay, I have got the right one. Hopefully you guys can see my PowerPoint. So good morning for another few minutes, everybody, as we transition over to the afternoon and lunchtime here. I'll try to be brief. I can get going on this topic and many others around community economic development. So I'll try to watch the time and leave enough time for some questions that you all may have. So good morning. I am Dana Culloware. I'm the Community Assistance Team Specialist for Western Michigan at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which is the state of Michigan's economic development agency. And I'm going to share some information on how the MEDC is supporting brownfields and using the tax increment financing program that was talked about earlier to support projects. So at MEDC, just a quick overview, we are working to develop attractive places and attract talent through innovative placemaking and streamlining development processes at the community level to transform underutilized properties into vibrant areas. Out of our operational plan, there are 4 initiatives that really speak to this focus area to help work towards our state's strategic plan, which is creating a development-friendly ecosystem, offering Main Street business support, prioritizing place-based projects, and providing support for infrastructure needs. And in addition to the statutory requirements for incentive programs that we offer through the MEDC, our community development unit essentially has also established goals for identifying priority projects that includes brownfield projects that we may be considering for offering some support. In projects, I'm not going to read all of this heavy text. The next few slides have a lot of text, but I understand there's people that may want to review slides later or look at the presentation later. So I wanted to provide more information on the slides than that. But in projects we're considering for an incentive, we emphasize 3 areas, which are local and regional impact, place considerations, and financial considerations. And projects don't necessarily need to check all of the proverbial boxes, but really should align with a number of the community development priorities identified over the next few slides for us to consider a priority project that we may consider for funding. In regards to local and regional impact, which is identified here on the screen, it's really important that the project we're considering is aligned with the vision and goals of the community, and that the community has a documented public participation strategy for engaging a diverse set of community members. We want to make sure that the projects are located where infrastructure is already located, possibly connect to a local or regional employment opportunities, and it may be within a geographically disadvantaged area, which in the state of Michigan is identified through census tracts. So there are already predetermined areas of communities throughout the state. And then we are also prioritizing projects being led by emerging developers who have limited to no real estate development experience. In regards to our place considerations, we want to see projects that are within walkable, dense, traditional downtowns or neighborhood mixed-use districts, or support a traditional walkable downtown. So they might not be located in a geographic area that's been designated officially as such, but maybe just adjacent to and would support that district and those businesses located within that particular area. So we work with the property owner to include access to public transportation and non-motorized transportation where possible. So if a project doesn't include it at the onset, our team, my colleagues, were working with those individuals to try to bring those types of activities into the projects to ensure that we're creating projects that are good for the community. Finally, we look at the need for the incentive program as demonstrated through a project pro forma. In the case of Brownfield TIF projects, we are looking to see that the project is economically sound and financially feasible with the tax increment financing applied to the project. And we're just checking assumptions to see if the cost and cash flow are reasonable for the project. But you can see here what we typically evaluate for all of our incentive projects. They aren't necessarily brownfield specific, but that's, as I mentioned, how we are looking at brownfield projects. So in the state of Michigan, this was already discussed a bit, but projects are supported through the MEDC through the tax increment financing method at this time. We look at as eligible projects coming in for state tax capture that they are contaminated, as we've already discussed, but the other eligible activities or ways that a project could qualify is that they're functionally obsolete, meaning that the property is unable to be used to adequately perform the function for which it originally was intended due to substantial loss in value, and that's determined really by an assessor. The property could be considered blighted, and that means that the property is determined by the local unit of government to be a public nuisance. It could be a fire hazard. Major utilities and systems may have been removed or destroyed. There's a few different ways that it could qualify, but that's qualified by the local unit of government as blighted. And then finally, it can be qualified as a historic resource. So it's either on a local district historic register or in a local district, or it's on the National Register of Historic Places. And then we also qualify projects that are adjacent and contiguous properties that are also eligible for tax capture. So if a project is contaminated, the project or the buildings and properties that are adjacent to it could also be incorporated into the project, the broader project, and utilize our tax increment financing to support it. The MEDC and Eagle partner on brownfield projects, with the MEDC administering the non-environmental activities and Eagle administering the environmental activities. So what I mean by the non-environmental activities, you can see below, and that's really creating the brownfield plan, and we require what's called an Act 381 work plan, and those costs for preparing that, usually through a consultant, are eligible to be reimbursed. We also may include interest if we can demonstrate that there's a need for that interest, financial need for it. Lead and asbestos abatement and what we call core communities, those are identified through the state of Michigan. Those communities also are eligible for some site preparation activities and some infrastructure. So now on to a few project examples. I have 3 to share with you quickly. Here you can see in the city of Kalamazoo, this was a former historic paper manufacturing building. It's 3 stories, and you can see that there was an addition that's not historic located there. So this project could have qualified as a historic project, but was qualifying under the contamination that existed on the site. There was significant contamination located next to Portage Creek. So it was really important that this site be cleaned up and put back into productive economic use. It included job retention and creation. That building had a proposed tenant, office tenant, that would be relocating jobs and creating some new jobs. But it also included, in partnership with the local municipality, pedestrian bridge, walkways, bus stop, river trail. So you can see how it just being really important to reactivate these sites so that not only are you using the real estate in terms of the business use, but also the site itself as a benefit for the employees that are on that site and also the community. You can see here just a quick snapshot of the eligible activities that I talked about on the last slide that this project is reimbursed for or is being reimbursed for, and just the amounts associated with that investment. And here is the after of that building. It's a little fuzzy, but you can see that it's cleaned up and a much better site that's actively used today. The second project is in the city of Grand Rapids, and that is located in West Michigan, where I work. I work with the city of Grand Rapids specifically, but this was redevelopment of a 3.3 acre site that you can see in the picture there that had a myriad of different buildings that were, functionally obsolete, but the site itself was qualifying as contaminated. So this was indeed cleaning up a contaminated site, and there was a light industrial building on the site as well. And this is just on the edge of the traditional downtown in an area of the city that was really looking to create some sort of spark and catalytic project to jumpstart activity reinvestment in this area for those that were directly in this neighborhood, but also adjacent to it. Post-construction, after the cleanup, there are several new buildings, and included in there is a full-service urban grocery store, 116 apartments, office space, and embedded parking. And then adjacent to the project that the MEDC funded through tax increment financing was an adjacent project that included 5-story retail and an apartment building that included low-income housing tax credit units. So it was a mixed income project across the site and led to significant new residential space as well as job creation, and I think very importantly to both the downtown and this neighborhood provide fresh, healthy food access. So it was a significant project for the city of Grand Rapids, and you can see involved significant partnership as well in the amount of incentives that were applied to make the project happen. And here is the after. The Bridge Street Market is what that is called, but it's a small scale urban grocery format for those regionally that know of Meijer grocery store. That's actually a Meijer grocery store. And then the final project I want to mention is in the city of Detroit. That's Orleans Landing. This was a conversion of a 7.5-acre vacant and significantly contaminated site on the Detroit riverfront. The ultimate project included a mix of retail, commercial, and residential housing, and you can see led to significant number of multifamily housing units, over 20 new buildings. It was a mixed income project that improved walkability, access to community amenities, and access really, it's within eyeshot, you can't see in this picture, of downtown Detroit. So it did provide a greater connection to the downtown area as well. Eligible activities on the site were demolition, infrastructure, and site preparation. And there were a variety, again, with this project, of incentives applied to make this project come to fruition, including tax increment financing and a few other programs that were offered at the time, and some still are through the MEDC. Significant private investment and partnership with Eagle, Invest Detroit, and the City of Detroit's EDC. And here is a quick after shot to the right of the site of the buildings throughout. So kind of created a mini multifamily housing unit neighborhood on the Detroit riverfront. Finally, just a few quick slides before we get to questions. I know we're running short on time. We have more resources about Michigan's Brownfield TIF program on our website at myplace.org. There are also projects available for business development, so more industrial manufacturing projects, expansion of manufacturing, and there's some links out to that. I just cover more community economic development projects, so you can see that we're applying the same tools as a business development project to more traditional downtown settings. And we have project profiles available on our homepage of our website, so you can review past projects as well and kind of peruse that to see what other projects might spark some creative thinking for you on projects you're thinking about. And my contact information is available here, and I know it's available on the website as well for the conference. So thank you so much. I think we're going to open it up to questions from our panelists, and I'm going to exit and stop sharing my screen here a second. Oh, it's done for me.
All right. Thank you all. Lots of great information. I know we don't have much time left, so I'm going to try to squeeze in a couple of questions. I'm going to combine some of them. I'm getting back to the theme of the conference. How do you measure or consider equity, environmental justice, community impact, or community benefits in brownfield proposals? And I'll just open that up to any one of you that wants to answer.
Sure. Our tools are limited to the tax increment financing program and the projects that you discussed, but overarching to that, as we're vetting projects through the MEDC, we are looking at, first and foremost, we're always evaluating the accessibility of our programs, our incentive programs, and what are the barriers to accessing them to ensure that we are providing information and access to our programs, and that is an ongoing process, really. So it is at the forefront of our minds, however, and we have active work going on in that area. Additionally, through our strategic plan, we have identified the importance of providing incentives and our programs to geographically disadvantaged areas. And that is something that we do specifically look at when we're evaluating projects to ensure that we're hitting certain thresholds around that particular area. And that applies to more than just our Brownfield program. So those are a few ways that we attempt to address that through the MEBC.
Yeah, and we also look at those same types of things when we have a project that's brought in. Typically, we're always, in fact, we're always in, talking with the local communities before a project even comes in. But when an official proposal is submitted that's vetted within our Eagle staff, one of the factors that we look at is if the project is in an environmental justice area. We use tools like EJ Screen, knowledge of the area. And we also really look heavily at what the private investment is going to be, right? How many jobs are going to be created in these areas to make sure that it's a good fit for the local communities. But it's definitely something that we keep, that's evaluated when a project comes into Eagle.
For EPA, our season for Brownfield grant applications is in the fall. So typically in, say, October, September, is when we have the call for proposals, and that'd be one way to go through the front door to ask for funding from EPA, and that would be where we have criteria in the guidelines that speak to environmental justice communities and how we're scoring that particular proposal versus others. And I would also just emphasize that there's other ways to get funding besides just the traditional grant path in the fall, but there are opportunities to get technical assistance from one of the providers that I mentioned earlier, that be able to do some work earlier or do work before the project is ready to go for that grant application. That might be very attractive to environmental justice communities. And also our targeted Brownfield assistance is almost like a one-off program. If you have one project or a small number of projects, you just need some help on that targeted work, that's another resource we can bring now. You don't have to wait until the fall to apply for that type of funding. That might also be attractive to small rural communities, environmental justice communities that have a single project they just want to get moving because of the timeliness to be able to get that moving forward. That's another thing that we offer.
All right, we have 2 minutes, so I'm going to ask this other one that's kind of been asked a couple of times in a couple of different ways. Can Brownfield funding be used to turn the Brownfield into a greenfield, or to bring it back to nature, or provide parks?
So under the state's programs, we can use some of our funding to do recreational space. On one of the new projects that we're working on, actually in the city of Detroit, it's going to be the new Centennial Park right on the riverfront. So we have done those before. We have provided some funding also around the river. We not only Orleans Landing, but some properties across the street on the other side of, for the Detroit people, at water there, that our field staff had done. But it's definitely an option and a possibility for our funding to be used for those things, for sure.
I'll add, same thing for EPA. It's definitely an option. I will caution that it is a more challenging option. When you look at the criteria, you look at how it's going to be scored. A project that is 100% pure open space isn't necessarily going to have the jobs, the housing, some of the pieces in those project examples that I gave earlier. And so it's something to be aware of when you think of going after money, is that open space project and how competitive it might be against other projects. So it might be a good chance to think about how you mix an open space project in with some other redevelopment options to have a combined project that can really meet a lot of the criteria goals for EPA's funding.
Yeah, and same thing with Eagle, right?
Yeah.
Just an open field might not cut it, but something like Centennial Park, something like that, you're definitely going to have, a pretty good chance of accessing our funding.
Yep, and I would just echo some of that same sentiment, given that, we're considering some of the impacts to, creating new small business space, or how it's, contributing to creating jobs and such. So, we would be looking at how, incorporating green space or pocket parks or other such type of important community amenities are included in a combined project.
Great. Thank you again so much for being here today and talking about brownfields. I'm going to encourage our speakers today to get into the Whova app, and I can see some replies have already been added since we weren't able to get to all the questions, but I'm going to turn it over to Les now to close the session out.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you to all of our panel this afternoon. Just want to remind everyone to please provide feedback on the sessions today and throughout the conference in the Whova app. We really appreciate the feedback. Just a reminder that the next session starts at 1 o'clock, transition in EJ communities. And we look forward to seeing you all at the next session. Katie, do you have anything else?
No, we'll see you all this afternoon. Thanks.